Hey everybody, welcome to Rambling with RamblePak. I am joined by, should I just call you Distractible Dad or are you Disagreeable Dad? Which one is it?
I'm Paul Spooner. I'm trying out some channel branding, but yeah, I'm Paul Spooner. I have been for years.
There we go, Paul Spooner. And Ross, also known as
Hello.
Navarth. He will not be shown as anything but this big distractible red screen.
Yes, very red.
But yeah, this isn't something I plan to do like too often for my channel. At most, like once between each video I upload. I don't want it to be something that's going to overtake people's subscription feeds. I don't want to clog things up. But and I did start an extras channel that was supposed to be for this thing, but that idea was spawned before YouTube was like, maybe we should move all the live streaming to a live tab so people can sort this stuff out themselves. And it's like, oh, well, gee, thanks YouTube for doing that when you did. But either way, we are here and we're going to discuss a couple of things today. The first, we actually will start with addressing a little bit the Microsoft, just addressing Microsoft. Because there's a lot of stuff
Hello,
that,
Microsoft.
yeah. Hello, Microsoft.
How
Can
you
you
doing?
hear us? You should listen to what we little amateurs have to say.
Yeah.
Well, okay, two of us are amateurs. One of us is actually a professional.
I worked on one of Microsoft's games, one of their most popular games, in fact. So,
Did you?
Oh yeah.
yeah, I wrote some of the code in
Minesweeper?
Minecraft.
Oh,
Oh dang! I did not know that.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
cool.
actually, is Minesweeper Microsoft, or is that just something they bought and plug into?
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah. What about like
Yeah,
the pinball?
they made an
Yeah.
implementation.
3D Cadet
Good old
pinball.
Windows 3D Cadet pinball.
Yeah.
So Microsoft, what are they doing today?
Oh my goodness, they're up to so many things lately. The first is layoffs, big layoffs, and this was something I was actually trying to bring in my buddy Joe to discuss before, but it's a good thing it was delayed because we have potentially further context for it. Because as we discussed a little bit before pre-show, a lot of people look at Microsoft as this big company with all of this infinite supply of money, and they're like they're worth 3 trillion net worth, and it's like, yeah, that doesn't mean they have $3 trillion. It means if they sell
Yeah.
everything, they can get $3 trillion, but that 3 trillion then has to be spread around a lot of people globally.
Yeah. We're not
Um,
sure like how much of that is liquid and how much of that is like eaten up by the teams that rework Skype every day.
Yeah.
You mean Microsoft
And a lot of it
Teams?
is in future value. So it's like the licenses they hold for the software that they have already produced, and they're expecting to get income from that, and so that goes in the network too. So it's not
Yeah.
like it's sitting in a vault and Scrooge McDucking in it or whatever.
But that's also the thing, because it was what they reported about 140 billion in profit year ending September 30th. And so, people look at the layoffs and they look at the number and they're like, "What? How do you justify this?" And I mean, here's the thing. I can sound callous whenever this topic comes up in the games industry, but largely because I just feel like people don't have, and it's surprising how people can't have enough real world experience dealing with things like layoffs. And because I've been laid off at nearly every job I've ever had. Now, on one hand, we could say that's because I'm not a very good employee, but my last job I had for 5 years, and I would have gotten laid off either way because it was in the travel industry and it was right before COVID.
Oh no.
Right,
So
right.
they were going to be hit with layoffs regardless. And that's the thing. Half my team was let go. Half the creative department was let go. So it's like, oh, okay, thanks. My current job, very good about not laying a lot of people off, but they've had to in a couple of instances because, now it's a marketing firm. And with the economy being what it is, more companies are trying to tighten their belts where they can. And therefore, they're trying to cut some losses. And that even includes trying to cut with some marketing firm stuff. So layoffs happen. And I think this is
Yeah.
something that people look at the industry and they're like, we need to stop this and we need to unionize. And it's like, have you spoken with people in unions? People get laid off in unions too. And it's
Yeah, yeah.
usually
It's
at the
just
bottom.
Yeah.
So,
Well, Also, like, I think the games industry was almost like extra bad in this particular context because during COVID, they're one of the only industries that actually thrived. And then, I don't know, for whatever insane business reason, they just assumed, well, the number's going to keep going up that way. It'll be great. We'll just keep making these same profits. And they hired on all these people and took on all this debt, assuming, well, oh, it's just going to be explosive growth from now on. And then, of course, when it wasn't, we end up with layoffs because you have a giant team of 500 more people that weren't there, 2 years ago,
Yeah.
and plans for games that don't exist yet.
Yeah.
Things like that.
Yeah. So
And as far as like a strategy, a corporate strategy, it's actually a much better idea to hire more people than you need and then to lay a bunch of people off than to hire exactly the amount you need because of hiring and firing laws and things. Because it's really difficult to fire somebody as an individual if they're doing a bad job. But if you hire way more than you need, and then they just happen to get laid off along with a bunch of other people, then they can't say, "Oh, I was punished for something." You can dispense with the people that you don't want to have around. So I'm not saying that that's what Microsoft is doing in this instance, but it's certainly part of the culture, the corporate culture.
I also suspect there's some like natural attrition there as well, where it's like,
oh sure, yeah,
most of the time in a game studio, you're probably losing more people than you're taking on unless you're hiring new people. So you kind of have to expect that like your workforce will shrink over time. Maybe not always. I don't know if that's always the case. Some game studios at some times might be just growing beyond their means, but like I think in most places I know they've been losing people to retirement, to going to the studios, to their pay falling behind, all kinds of other reasons.
sure,
And they have to replace them actively rather than just sort of let people come in all the time, right?
Burned out. I'm sure that never happens
exactly.
at Microsoft, but
no, but that's where you also then get into, again, that profit, that 140 some billion profit, September 30th. In other words, before the acquisition went through, I believe. When did the acquisition go through? That wasn't until after September, was it? Because there was all the legal stuff still delaying it.
Yeah.
I don't know. And I don't know when that money got earmarked either. I'm sure that there's a whole payment plan and stuff.
But I mean, 60, that's the thing, 140 billion in profit and then boom, 69 billion expenditure. That's a lot of money. And this is also after, granted, most of it was like 5 years ago, but they had acquired several other studios before Microsoft acquired Activision Blizzard King. And so if you are Microsoft, right? And people keep talking like Microsoft is, just making money. But how much of that is actually off of Xbox? And this is
I don't know. And the other thing is they're not making money just by hiring everybody and keeping them all on forever, right? Like they're making money because we got the right people there.
Yeah.
If they wouldn't be making money. So,
but that's the thing. It's like who is making money is probably like the Office 365 team, the Teams team, unfortunately, because every company thinks Teams is good software.
Oh, no.
That's pretty sad.
You've got SharePoint. You've got all of these, and honestly, there's Windows, of course, because every company is going to have Windows. So you have all of these licensing agreements with all of these companies, with all of these.
Bing search is huge.
Skype is still active somehow.
Skype's still there. What's the Azure Web Services is nothing.
Oh, that's right.
OpenAI.
OneDrive. Sorry.
OneDrive.
Oh, so, yeah, actually, OneDrive is huge.
They've got a ton of things that they license, and because every corporation just about uses these, basically all of your profit is coming from corporations, but from the consumer sector. Now, there's reasons you're still going to want to distribute something like Windows, and that's why, they're still allowing Windows 11 to be free, I believe. You can still get your free upgrade to Windows 11 because they just want people on the system because...
Like a lot?
Yeah. But...
yeah.
And this is also where they want to do everything through storefronts, so that if you're buying software, they want you to buy it through the Microsoft storefront. But when it comes to gaming, do you really think Xbox is profitable? I mean, I think at this point, everyone kind of knows it's like Game Pass. People are pretty sure.
Well, it didn't start profitable, right? Like at the beginning, they were doing it as a loss leader, like absolutely hands down.
Everyone always does consoles loss leader, and that's why
Yeah.
Microsoft was probably able to survive. But then by 360, I guarantee you they were making a lot of money with that and stuff with Xbox Live as well. So they had a lot of good first party titles for a while. They had
Yeah.
Xbox Live. They had all these ways to make money, and especially because the 360 was the dominant leader at the time. But the 360 was able to be the leader because Sony screwed up badly enough.
Yeah, with
X-
the PlayStation 3.
Xbox One comes around and there's two things going against them. One of which was people were getting sick of the Red Ring of Death. So at that point, PlayStation 3 was more affordable. PlayStation 3 had a better library. Developers were finally used to the cell architecture, sort of. Enough
They were
that,
able to live with it.
yeah,
Yeah.
enough that
I
you could
still
make a
think
decent
that
game.
was like someone pitched that and they went, we don't care about the tech. Do you mean to say that it'll be hard to port our games to other platforms? And someone said yes, and they're like, do it.
Do it. You'll have no choice but to stick with us. We're Sony,
Yeah,
man.
exactly.
And I guess that must have been in their sticking mind with Xbox or something. And also, Xbox One, you had to get it with a Kinect. It's like they made the same mistake,
that's
but
right.
worse.
Right.
They
Yeah.
made the same mistake, but worse. And so, granted, at the same time, Sony didn't have as many people changing leadership in the same time frame. Like, I love watching the original Xbox, the making of Xbox documentary. That original team that made that first Xbox, those guys were great. And then a lot of them left the company because they were like, I don't ever want to work that hard on something again. Young man's game. So, and that's a shame because a lot of people, now they did get Peter Moore, who was pretty good in charge of, it's funny because, guy that helped lead the Dreamcast, which was a failed console, comes on board with Xbox.
Oh, I didn't know.
But
That's cool.
aside from the Red Ring of Death, which was partially rushing, they really this is almost a history of Xbox now. One of the biggest mistakes with the 360 was that rush to market, which is exactly what happened with the Dreamcast, right? We're going to rush to market and beat it everyone else. If it wasn't for the fact that Sony screwed up so badly, I think that would have been a mistake on Microsoft's part. Rushing that 360 out by 2005. But they were lucky. E3 2006, Sony comes out and is like $599 US, and boom, set. Xbox is the clear winner for a while. But they rushed it to market, and that's what caused the Red Ring of Death oversight.
Yeah. It's crazy to think the console generations used to be that short, too.
Well, even then, Xbox was, I mean, again, PlayStation 2 releases in 2000, PlayStation 3, 2006.
Right.
The Wii was also 2006, but that was 5 years because GameCube and Xbox released in the same season. They were both 2001. But that's the thing, the Xbox One, they're forcing the Kinect. The very first reveal of it, like a month before E3, was all TV, TV, TV. And it was expensive. Meanwhile, PlayStation 4 is exactly what gamers want. Plus, there's the whole questionable ownership issue.
Yeah, that was big when it came out.
Oh, that was the biggest thing that had people, like, aside from TV, like, that was the final nail in the coffin. Nobody was getting an Xbox One at that point. Like, very few people. Everyone was going to PS4, especially with PS4's amazing, like, here's how you lend a game to your friend. Boom, thanks,
Yeah.
like that meme video.
I've like been in corporate meetings that felt just like that reveal of like the Xbox like ownership stuff, and it was like, this is what's supposedly a public facing announcement of features that you're supposed to get everyone excited about, but it's aimed solely at the C-suite, right? Like the CEOs, exactly what they want. Everybody else is looking at it going, oh, that sounds terrible. I don't want that. What do you mean? What are you talking about? And then, of course, the CEOs are like, do it. Yeah, we're going to make all the money. It's like,
Well, also,
so out of touch.
I mean, the nice thing about that documentary is that at least owned up. It's like, so that reveal was supposed to be for everyone that wasn't a gamer. It turns out we should have revealed to the gamers first and tried to sell this whole thing. The TV, I mean.
Yeah.
And that's the
Oh,
thing. It's
sure.
like the TV. It's like, I'm sorry, but people that don't play games don't want to spend $500 on your like. For as much as these gaming companies want to get people that don't play games, they don't seem to understand people that don't play games. Like the
Yeah.
Wii, there are people that will still play their Wii once in a while, but the Wii itself is like you can't look at it as a gaming device that people went and bought. It was a technological fad device that they use like an exercise machine, maybe. Like
Yeah.
it's this weird cross between utility and exercise machine, but they don't look at it like a video game console. They don't look at it like us
Well, it's like
regular
with like a
gamers.
sprinkle of like the Rock Band controller thrown in for good measure, right?
Mm,
Yeah, it's more comparable to see. It's so funny because it's like the Wii was such a magic device in a way because it combines all these different elements because you could compare it to a lot of things, right? It's like, oh, people bought a Kindle, right? Kindle has a
mm,
bit of a utility and allows people to read. And hey, some people probably read more books because, hey, it's data storage, not physical storage.
sure.
But then you have the fact that it's also a board game. Only it's a lot of board games. But it's only the
Mm,
board games that you really want to play, like the Wii Sports, the Wii Fit board, like again, exercise machine. It is this multi-purpose device, and trying to take this, what was it, $250 at launch? Trying to take this $250 device and then get people to say, hey, buy our $500 minimum Connect device that's always
yeah.
on and is always watching you, by the way. Like
Right.
it's this
Right.
disconnect.
Well, because the Wii is, it's not even the Wii, right? It's Nintendo. Nintendo is a family friendly company, and so like people don't buy a Wii because they want to use the connector, exercise, or whatever, right? They buy it because it's a family device. It's like, oh, family entertainment, great, solve that problem. Now we can do something else. And so it's like, you've got a bunch of kids around. Do you want to buy the family-friendly device that's got Mario and the cute dinosaur, or do you want to buy the corporate box that's always spying on you? It's like, well, that's not even a question. And the same thing with all the like the really hardcore gamer games. Like, if you're somebody who's just buying a gaming console because you want to have something for your kids to play on, are you going to be like, oh, I want the wargaming thing, or do I want the super hardcore like ultra graphics with all the blood effects? It's like, I don't want that, right? I want the Nintendo thing. Whatever Nintendo's doing, I'm going to buy it, right? It's like the marketing has no effect on that whatsoever, and if it does, it has a negative effect on your product. So, like you said, the people who are trying to develop and market these products generally, and this is something that Seamus is always harping on, uh, generally don't have, they're not in touch with the market that they're trying to reach, right? Like
Oh
everyone
yeah.
needs food, and if you're managing a fast food store, you're like, oh, I understand, you want to sit down and have a nice meal. But not everyone plays video games, and if you're managing a video game company, you'd better be the kind of person who cares about this stuff, or you're going to be completely out of touch. It's just, you're not going
Yeah.
to be able to make good decisions.
Or at least you need to understand your audience. And oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Well, firstly, quick hello to Tracer Frenzy watching. Commented, hey, good to see you online. I might be confusing screen names from my past. I believe Tracer Frenzy is someone that I went to college with. If they are, good to see you again. It's been a long time. If you're not, apologies for the confusion. It's been a while. But to follow up on your point as well, because I recently reread the book Console Wars. I know I talked about it before in the
Mm,
past. It's a really good book, and it mostly follows from the Sega of America side of things. But one of the things is surprisingly the yep, go time. Okay, yes, it is my friend. Okay, good to see you
cool.
again, man. It's been a
Well,
while.
that's good.
But the like memorable marketing team, like the guys that got Sega to be sold, at first didn't know exactly what they were doing because they thought like they did research, they tried to understand kids and stuff like that, and their first
Mm,
focus tests were the very first focus tests were basically a bunch of teen kids looking at and being like, dude, this is dumb. You don't need to tell me my parents don't understand video games. I already know that. And other stuff
Sure.
like that. Like they're like, this ad sucks. And it's like, holy crap, we thought we were speaking their language and yet we don't understand. So even if you are trying to learn,
Yeah, even if you
The
try,
lang-
you can fail. But you're
Yes.
certainly going to fail if you don't try.
Definitely.
and that's the thing, like, but I think with Microsoft it was more, okay, we got the gamers, now let's expand. And this seems to be what a lot of, and especially now, like nobody seemed to learn. Nobody in these big corporations, these big companies, because there's actually in some ways you could draw parallels even with Disney, right? It's like, all right, and if you go back, it's like, all right, we're going to buy Marvel and we're going to buy Lucasfilm. Why? Well, we've got the girl market cornered. We're going to start trying to appeal to the boy market. Well, somehow they lost track of that, but
Yeah.
at the same time, it's like you look at how much money they spent on these things, and maybe they got their money back with Marvel by now, but with Star Wars, or with how much they spent on Lucasfilm, that's still in the red. They have not made the money back on that acquisition.
Haven't they? I mean, with all the merchandising and everything. No, you don't
The
think so?
They keep
merchandising
putting
ain't
up more
selling.
Star Wars stuff. I
No.
feel like I feel like they're just digging themselves deeper into the hole at
They
this
are.
point.
They are
Well,
because the
serves them
merchant.
right if they are.
I mean and so the Marvel toys were selling well, but over the past few years, the Marvel toys aren't selling. The Star Wars toys haven't been selling since maybe The Last Jedi. And that's the thing. That's where you have that big, well, granted, there's some stuff that's known and then some stuff that's rumors. So I'll leave it at that.
Yeah.
But to draw
Sure.
this to Microsoft, we now have a situation where Microsoft is, I mean, how much did they spend on all the other companies before they got to Microsoft, Activision, Blizzard, King? I'm so used to saying all of that together that leaving the
ABK.
Microsoft out is
MABK.
Mab Mab
It's just
Mab King. It's not a Mad King. It's a Mab King.
yeah.
But no, it's like you have a lot of money. So to catch back up, it's January 2024. You're like the bean counters, the higher up bean counters of Microsoft, and you're tallying everything that's making a profit and everything that's losing money. And for years, the gaming division's been losing money. And all of these efforts to get customers, get subscribers, all of these efforts, and you're still in the red, and you're spending a lot of money and you're still in the red, and you're looking at this big $69 billion acquisition you just made, and you're looking at, okay, we just spent a lot of money. Now let's look at the overhead.
When anytime you make a big acquisition, you're going to have some overhead overlap, right? You're going to eliminate, joint positions, all the payroll people, and all that. There's a lot of administrative.
You've got your
kind of
own
stuff.
infrastructure already, and you don't need a duplicate of that from another
exactly.
company.
You don't need another headquarters. I mean, all that kind of thing.
Well, part of that is
But-
evidently a mixture of things that even, because that's the thing, again, I try and say, it's like, look, there's a bigger picture a lot of people aren't seeing when they're like, you don't have to lay anybody off, you big corporate shareholder pleasing. It's like, and again, it's like, this is a division that's losing money and they're going to try and staunch some of the bleeding where they can. But at the same time, they're cutting their physical division. And it's like, and we already see that, like, no more physical games at Best Buy, at Target and Walmart, I think. They're cutting it in the UK. And that's something that, for me, is very unfortunate because we already see that digital preservation is awful in games. And
It's not great.
Oh yeah.
yeah, and they want things to move towards...
Stream model would be the end of preservation. Period. If it was the only thing we
oh,
could
yeah.
do, right?
Well, it's not even just
It'd
that.
be done.
Streaming, like, it's funny, like, just today someone brought the clip of Matt Damon discussing in like on a Hot Wings episode from August 2022, where someone talked to him about, the smaller movie that Hollywood used to make, and he's like, well, you can't even do that anymore because you used to make up for all right, you're not going to make. So you got your budget, you got your marketing, and then you got what you got to split with the theaters.
Mm,
A lot of movies don't make their money back in theater, but those movies go on television, those movies go on DVD, and you make up the long tail on DVD sales.
sure.
To the point that like movies are still making money 10 years after their original release.
Mm,
So you don't have that anymore now that everyone's gotten on board with streaming. And this is partially an issue with music as well, because now people are just going to Spotify. And the money made in that model is not that great. You're discouraged from
there's a
spending.
reason that the customers are going there because it's way cheaper for a customer
Yeah,
than it is the other method, right?
it's not like the
But,
90s and the 2000s where you bought albums one at a time and stockpiled them somewhere, and every time you bought one, someone got a cut.
Right,
but
right.
that's the thing. The corporation now is disincentivized to make some of these more risky products that could develop a fan base in the home video market because there's
Mm,
no home video market and you're not going to make that money licensing. Like, and this is also of course why everyone's trying now to get into the streaming gig, and that's collapsing the market because nobody wants to have 1,000,001 streaming services.
yeah.
So
Yeah,
they
it always
want
comes
to
back
do,
to the cable model.
and this is where people are hoping to go with things like the Game Pass model and other subscription services. And
Mm,
it's like that this is one area where the gaming consumer is wisely slow to adopt. And I say
yeah,
wisely because again, games preservation is really bad right now.
yeah.
People want to own what they play. People want to be able to replay that game to go back to it at any point. Because at the very least, even if you can't buy a movie, there's a good chance you can rent it. Even though there's a lot of stuff that's still like I don't think they ever made a Blu-ray of the movie 13th Warrior, but you can at least still rent it.
Hmm.
I'm sure you
E-
could find, a bootleg copy on certain sites, and
A bootleg
Well,
European
you
copy where
can
it evidently did well.
and you can always rent it and rip it, and then you have a copy, right?
yeah,
I
that
mean, like
too.
it's not that hard anymore. Like if you're watching on your computer, it's trivial to just rip it right off the screen. So like
Yeah,
there's a
you can't
lot
do that
of
with a game, right? It's like
yeah,
the
it's much
data
harder. It's
is
much
is
harder to do it with the
embedded in
game.
the yeah, exactly, but you couldn't just get a video of it.
Right.
Well,
Yeah. Yeah.
I guess you
Although,
could
I
rip a
mean, if
video of
it's
it, but
yeah,
yeah,
if it's good
exactly,
enough for you, then it's fine. There was
yeah,
something you said, Ramble, that like made a few things click together. You mentioned before we started streaming that the gaming audience is kind of a much more rarefied audience than a lot of the other ones because if you're someone who reads books, well, if you learn to read, that's part of your education, and you learn to read, and so now you can read books, and now you're a customer for every author. And if you learn how to speak, well, then you're a customer for every movie maker because you can understand the language and you can see things. It's like, oh, well, now it's easy to market to you and you can consume that medium and you can be part of that. But if you're a gamer, uh, you have what's the phrase? A very specific set of skills, I think, that you've
yeah,
got that you've got to really grab onto and wrestle with before you can participate in the medium. And but there's another side of that, which is not only are gamers harder to find, just because the skills that you need to have to be a gamer are more difficult to acquire. You don't get them in the course of everyday life in general.
Yeah.
But the kind of people who are interested in gaming are what is it? Gamers gonna game, right? The people who are interested in gaming are going to be the kind of people who are always looking for an angle, who are always trying to optimize, who are used to being a participant, an active participant, right? Someone who's reading a book, well, it doesn't matter how they feel that day, the story's the same. Someone who's watching a movie, it doesn't matter how they feel, the ending's going to be the same. But someone who's a gamer, if they're not on their, they've got their edge that day, well, they're not going to do so well. Or if they're thinking about something else or distracted, or if they've been reading about strategy or they've been browsing the wiki, right? It's like all this is going to affect their experience. So gamers are harder to find and they're also harder to keep because if a gamer sees a company doing something that's like, oh, we're gonna box you in and we're gonna get all your money, and they're gonna be like, no, you're not. I'm a gamer. What do you think I'm doing? Like, I've got options. I'm a participant. I'm
yeah.
active here. I get to choose.
We can tell when they're like also trying to like draw in an audience that isn't gamers, and to the exclusion of like what we like too, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like,
Again,
it's fairly obvious. So when they're like, well, we don't actually care about gamers, we have them locked in, we're going to go for another audience.
Oh, do you? It's like the Houdini audience. How are you going
Exactly.
to lock us in? It's
Yeah.
impossible.
well, again, you have the Nintendo Wii once more, where Nintendo's strategy in that time pivoted a bit. Because, okay, we've sold a ton of these consoles. Let's take all of our games and somehow make them more friendly to our new audience. And surprise, surprise, you started to lose your core audience, and that new audience, they didn't want to buy a game per month. They didn't want to buy this huge library of new games. It turns out the person that wants to play Wii Sports doesn't want to play Metroid Prime 3 Corruption.
Right.
Surprisingly.
And the person that wants to play Metroid Prime 3 Corruption doesn't even want to play Metroid Other M, it turns out, but that's a whole other...
I don't think anyone wants to play the Metroid Other M.
I still kind of
Only
like it.
connoisseurs.
I hate it
I
and I
was
love
gonna
it.
say,
Okay. All right.
I hate it and I love
exactly. You're describing exactly what I was about to say. Connoisseurs of games that evoke emotions, not necessarily positive.
it. Interesting ideas mixed up with some really bad ones. But that's the thing. Like,
But
Nintendo,
I'll say, yeah, if Microsoft's trying to corner the market, they're like, oh, well, now we've got Blizzard, now we've got Diablo, right? We've got the IP, and all the Diablo guys are ours forever. It's like, no, they're not. Like, there's no way.
well, first they
That's what
got
happened
to
with
start
SimCity,
doing
right?
They got to
Yeah.
do damage
SimCity, they're like,
control.
oh, we're gonna do all this online always DRM stuff, and it's like, okay, we'll just go to City Skylines. Screw you guys.
Yeah.
Didn't
And
this-
it's like not only do the gamers leave at that point that are faithful in their actual brand, you probably lose like a solid number of the devs, right? You're going to be bleeding the
Yeah.
passionate developers that make those games to other
Yeah.
companies that make games like the kind they make. And especially if another studio like reaches out and is like, we're making games like you used to make that you like to make, and some of your friends are here. Would you like to come work for us? Oh man, are they going to leave?
Yeah.
I'm
You don't
gone
even
in a
have to
second.
advertise, right? Your friends are going to tell each other, and
Yeah,
all
exactly.
your best guys are going to go.
so
Yeah, it's hard.
this is another little sticking point, and I typically normally it's my buddy Joey that makes me slip up and get closer to my political antics because I try to avoid politics. But one of the things when these layoffs happen that I hate is people's like, well, blame capitalism, and it's like capitalism allows you to leave that studio, or after you get laid off, start a new studio and be like, you can play our spiritual successor over here and give you an option. Like, you not only do the employees have options, it's like, it turns out you don't have to stay with that company. You can, before Suicide Squad shipped, the founders of the studio left. Who knows what they're going to be making next? It'll take probably 5 years to show up. But I mean, this is where you get Spears. I mean, you see the new trailer for Judas by Ken Levine. Turns out Ken Levine's just making another BioShock. Then again, I think it's still 2K games. Saints Row. Saints Row started as an imitation GTA because they could do that. It grew into its own thing, but competition, right?
Yeah.
Capitalism allows people to leave and make their own thing. Capitalism is why I can go on to Steam Next Fest and play games that take great inspiration from Mega Man when Capcom's not making Mega Man. Or all of these games doing Metroidvanias, all of these roguelites and stuff. It's why Pal World exists, which is its own discussion.
Its own entire bomb of a discussion.
So, corporate overlording problems, that is its thing. But capitalism
all
is what
of the
enables
system.
competition. It enables people to make that spiritual successor. It's why
but also-
Bloodstained, there you go. Perfect example. Konami's not going to make Castlevania games. Koji Igarashi goes Kickstarter. Boom. He makes his own Castlevania, and it's a great game. So, capitalism. So,
Bomb Rush Cyberpunk
Bomb Rush Cyberpunk is another great example.
was hilarious. It was like they made a game at first. What was the name of it? With the ball that they hit back and forth. But they made a game that looked a lot like Jet Set Radio to begin with. The name eludes me, and I was like, oh, it looks so much like it, and it sounds so much like it. That's wild, but it doesn't play like it, so I'm not interested. And then the next game they made was just Jet Set Radio. And I was like, oh, perfect. They've done it. They figured it out.
Right down to the name sounding like, does it even have as many
Yeah.
syllables? Jet Set Radio, Bomb Rush,
Yeah.
Cyber Funk. I think, yeah,
It does. It does. It
So-
looks the same. It sounds the same. It plays the same. And it has like updates to the gameplay that anyone that played the first couple games would have gone, yeah, that's a no-brainer. Just do that.
Yeah. But again, this is the tragedy though, because then you have the Diablo, not the Blizzard team that were working on that survival game, and 6 years in development, and it sounds like you hear mixed feelings, right? Like all the people that were laid off were like, I loved this team, I loved working together, we were making something great, but then there's evidently, even from Jason Schreier, who's supposed to be, reliable, coming out being like, oh yeah, the game was a mess. And it's like, wait, so
right.
which was it? Because if the game was a mess, then I understand canceling the game. Like, all right, you guys clearly suck at what you're doing. Make something you're good at. But then they're like, whole team's gone. And it's like, wait, look,
Was
Diablo
anyone
4,
there that was doing a good job?
Diablo 4 shipped. Clearly, there's got to be stuff you could put people on there for like post game content or whoever's in pre production. Like, you got to have people working on World of Warcraft stuff that could use help. Like, you don't have, and there's got to be unannounced games. Like, Blizzard's
for sure.
big enough that there's got to be stuff we don't know about in development. You can't divvy up those developers. So that's one of those things that is unfortunate. I can only imagine that was a team full of less experienced team members, that this was supposed to be like their first game on their own, and they were like, all right, they're making a trash product. We're not going to waste money on their game or them. Get rid of them so we have the proven developers, we'll call it.
I feel like even then you'd still want to retain like because you can't make a game out of just inexperienced developers unless you're making like a Mass Effect.
You will need to have
apparently.
at least. You will need to have a.
I joke, but even in that project, I'm sure there were plenty of people that had experience that were at the top that were trying to help.
Yeah,
out.
it must.
It's just
Yeah,
the ratios were not in order, but yeah.
but the that's the most. But that's the thing. It's like I feel like they probably did lay off more than they needed to. But
So I'm not familiar with the story. What's the rough, like, is this like 50% of their workforce? Or what are they
1,900
doing?
people were laid off. Most of them
Holy
in
crap!
Activision Blizzard, but there were some again, like they got rid of their physical retail division even.
Sure.
So for
So-
context, that might now don't quote me on this, but that might be the entirety of all Ubisofts in Canada.
Holy cow!
That number
really?
of people.
Yeah, that's a lot of people.
I'm just guessing by the studio size and how many studios there are, but it about adds up to the same.
Now this is. I don't know other like most of the reports come out of Blizzard, who were pretty big, but I believe other parts of Activision were hit as well. And again, a lot of it's going to be like different HRs. Oh, that's right. The Activision customer support's basically gone, and they're outsourcing, which that, as someone that our internal IT is outsourced. Outsourced IT has never been as good as internal IT. I will just say that. And
The same is very true of QA.
But it's so inexpensive.
you get what you pay for. And now your customer support is going to be that. So
Oh, wow.
good luck, have fun. So there's
It's
but so but that's the thing, like this was a huge layoff. And there are still more layoffs, and they're going to keep happening. And this is across all industries, though. All industries are going to be seeing more layoffs through 2024, I imagine. But
I do think games are extra prone to layoffs because they actually succeeded before and they assumed the growth would continue. So the delta is even bigger from where they are now to where they have to fall to be profitable.
so
So I just did a quick search, and it looks like there's about 10,000 employees at Activision Blizzard. So that's like
that was
20% of the
lot
workforce.
Workforce, yeah.
Oof.
Yeah.
So you lose that many, And anyways, the whole point that I was trying to build, this was only supposed to be some of what we talked about. Oh man, but the whole point to build this towards though was the recent rumors from this weekend, which is Microsoft taking a bunch of their games third party. Now, again, this was already rumored and even some bits of leaks for like Hi-Fi Rush, and I think there was one other game. I cannot remember what it was, but Hi-Fi Rush was the big one, and you kind of see it because okay, smaller game, not huge. And it makes sense to release Hi-Fi Rush at least on other platforms. Like it's the kind of game that feels like it's not going to sell consoles, but it will do well multi-platform. So, and it did well on Steam. So yeah, Hi-Fi Rush multi-platform. You know, you get box art for Switch leaked. You get T-shirts that the main character can wear for Switch and PS5 leak. So all right, that's going to be going multi-platform. But then this weekend, it just boom, Starfield's going to go multi-platform. Boom, the Indiana Jones game is going to go multi-platform. Boom, Hellblade 2 could be going multi-platform. And it's like there are big names in like big reliable leakers that the industry probably hates that are confirming these things. And today Phil Spencer is reacting because there's a lot of people upset about this, you know. Now, granted, by a lot of people, I mean the handful of Xbox owners that are very loud on social media. And I admit I don't really prefer either one of them. I've traditionally preferred Xbox over Sony. Not anymore, but it's because I don't like either one of them. After this, it's Nintendo and Steam. It's Nintendo and Steam full speed ahead. But
Yeah.
the biggest, like, you're killing competition. Again, like, what is capitalism but competition? And you're killing it by basically making the only other big name for for high spec console gaming in town, you're making it Sony. Because but again, this is where Microsoft shot themselves in the foot, right? They haven't been able to move consoles, and that's some of the rumor. Some of the rumor is there are people very upset because, you know, they even dropped the Series X to 350. I forget what the Series S was dropped down to. Evidently, people were buying more Xbox Ones than Series systems.
Right.
And I'm wondering if part of this too, because Series S is the cheaper option to the Series X, right? You can play all the next gen games and you can play them on a cheaper platform, but it's got no disc tray. And as we were just discussing, gamers are slower to adopt an all digital future than most other media. So
Is it like, are they reverse compatible? Would there be people with libraries that they want to get rid of their old Xbox, but want to keep their games? Maybe.
technically Microsoft has been better with backwards compatibility. If you're waiting for Series X to get cheaper, then yeah, you can play a bunch of games on your Xbox One now. And then when the Series X is like $200, grab one of those and everything gets upgraded for free.
Yeah.
Now, wasn't one of the original draws of the Xbox for developers that it was easy to develop cross-platform between Windows and Xbox?
Very
Oh
easy.
Or
yeah,
am I imagining that?
no, it was like they even
Okay.
developed the X. I mean, the big draw for Xbox, period, and it was one of the goals from the very beginning was to be easier for developers to make games for.
Because
And
then it seems like the whole point of a console is that you've got this piece of hardware that's super optimized for this kind of application, which is games, and therefore it's going to be faster for a better price point and more reliable. But the Xbox has never been more reliable than, like, if you wanted to build your own PC, right? It's never been more reliable than that. It's never been faster than that, because if you want to build your own PC, you can build exactly what you want for, you know, and you can upgrade it, and like none of that is available on a console. And it's not been cheaper, because if you really want a cheap computer, you can build one yourself for pretty. I mean, I think you can build them for like $300, right? $250 or something. If you just want like a bare bones thing that'll run solitaire or whatever. And so it's like it can't win on any of those platforms. This is the same thing with the Steam Deck, right? The Steam Deck was this thing where it's like, oh, we're going to build a console. It's like, well, it's just a Linux PC, and like
Yeah.
anybody can do that. Why do we need you to do this for us?
I could think of a number of reasons being a traditional
Laziness.
console gamer. Well, there's that, but also for me, realizing a couple of things. One of which being if I want to upgrade my graphics card, I got to consider all kinds of other things like the motherboard. I got to consider compatibility with this. I got to consider if a new graphics card is compatible with that power source. So I feel like
Maybe not so much anymore, but yeah, back in the day, that was certainly a feature that you had to think about.
I still feel like it is, but then again, I'm a console gamer for a reason.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
I'm better with software than I am with hardware. Um,
Hmm.
but at some point,
Yeah,
I'm going
there's
to
an
get
entry
over it.
barrier to making PCs that I think is largely why people would prefer a console because they can just put the game in and play. I
Hmm.
think it's simple.
Yeah, yeah.
And also, so early on with Elden Ring, for example, Elden Ring on PC for well over a year, just always had stuttering. I tried every fix, I tried every
Hmm.
possibility, always had stuttering on my PC. So I also got it for Xbox, and I played it on Xbox a bunch with my friends. Now I can run it fine on my PC and at a better frame
Yeah.
rate, but there are going to be games that the experience is more, even if it's not as optimal, it's going to be more smooth on the whole on console than it would be on PC until they get that stuff fixed. Now, at
Yeah.
this
It does go
point,
both ways though. There are some PC games that are quite bad on console because they started as a PC game and they got ported over,
oh yeah,
and
there's
the
plenty
port
of that.
wasn't optimized.
It's one of the reasons that it's best to wait for Digital Foundry before you buy something. And at this point, dude, I'm done with pre-orders. I'm done with all that stuff. I might even be. There are going to be very few games I'm willing to do day one purchases on at this point, but that's a whole other story. Um, but going into again to keep this Microsoft why hello there, Joey Matakuya, my buddy, my pal, um, off in the Puerto Rico. How is it going? How's your vacation? Um, but so again, with all these rumors, basically it sounds like Microsoft is making a last ditch effort to start earning money back. But in doing so, they're kind of shooting themselves in the foot. Like I feel like they're in a no-win situation because, as I said, I doubt they've made a profit ever since Xbox One happened. They must have been losing money ever since the Xbox One, and
Certainly the
now
hardware division must have been. Like they're
Yeah,
still losing money on the hardware. The idea would be that they lose money on the hardware and then they get it
make up in
back on the other
peripherals,
end of the
software,
yeah,
services.
exactly. Subscriptions.
And the thing is, in some ways, in some ways, it's unfortunate because, like, I've seen people wonder, it's like, why do people think so highly of Phil Spencer, especially given his background? And I've thought highly of him as well. I think the biggest is you could tell Phil Spencer is one of those guys that actually does know about and care about games. The problem is he like Game Pass sounds like a good strategy, right? To try and get people on board. And it definitely feels like a good strategy. And so does the ability that it's like all of our first party games will be on console and PC.
Hmm.
Sounds great, only you've now given people no reason to buy your console. Um,
Except for all the things you were talking about, right? I mean, it's
yeah.
easy. You don't have to think about it. It's optimized
yeah,
delivery for that platform, all that kind of thing. But yeah, in general, like if it's all equal, then it's like, well, I just may as well get it on the PC because then I can do a bunch of other things with my PC.
yeah.
But
I mean, obviously, as a lifetime PC gamer, I always wondered, like, in a perfect world, wouldn't everything be multi-platform within reasonable limits if it has the specs for it? No, nothing would be artificially restricted to a platform because then
Hmm.
you buy consoles based on the features that you like rather than the games that are on it. And that's the model I think for mostly every other form of media, right? Like, it's not like you go to a theater and like only certain theaters will show certain movies because they have a
Yeah,
deal
yeah.
with the people making them, right? Like you
Well,
go to a theater and you watch movies.
IMAX
Yeah,
kind of tried to do that,
that's
but it
true.
didn't come
That's
out
true,
so well.
actually.
yeah.
Yeah,
No, I mean you got a point. At the same time, I mean we're about to see Sony continue their launch into live service hell.
Well,
right?
yeah, and also Sony is the company that does the most of that out of any company, and Microsoft's the one that does the least because they've always had the PC as an extra platform that they're like,
Yeah.
well, why not just sell on PC?
Well,
We own PC too.
they've largely kept games like Gears of War off PC.
Yeah,
They originally did Halo. They had
Halo was
their
wild for decades. Like you could get it on PC, but it came out. I forget how much
Games for
later.
Windows Live time. I know
Game of
Halo
Thrones,
2.
that was a dark hour.
Halo 2 was at least Games for Windows Live. Shadowrun was Games for Windows Live. But they still had plenty of games that weren't. And also, see, that's the thing, because they were games for Windows Live, that was incentive enough to play on Xbox instead. Like,
Yeah, that's not wrong.
so you had that element going on. But no, I mean, you're kind of right. They have always, all right, we're going to release on Xbox, but also PC. But at this, and that's the thing. I mean, to an extent, Paul's right. My machine here has got a 2070 graphics card. I don't run a lot of my games at full speed, like full intensity. And I don't run a lot of my. And that's the thing. I keep it at 60 frames a second capped. I do not try RTX. I tried some RTX stuff early on. Didn't find most of it worthwhile. But that's the thing, decent textures and stuff, and I'll get generally as good or better performance and good looking games comparable to my Series X. Most of my Series X gameplay is like just comfort and being able to record right from my Elgato without having to worry about both the recording processing and the gameplay processing. But like I could probably upgrade to a 3080 and get better performance than my Series X.
I
And
still
that's
have a
not
1070 Ti, just for context.
oh goodness. And you're developing.
Uh-huh. I haven't needed more than that yet. I'm assuming it's gonna come up soon, but I'm still doing okay.
Just every once in a while I want to get a new one shiny though. Every once in a while I'm
Yeah.
like, they got the 4080 out and I just want to get a 4080, but it costs more than a games console.
Yep.
But we got to wrap this up and move on to the actual topic that I have this episode titled under.
All right, let's do it.
I guess just to finish though, it's like Microsoft is making decisions at this point that they are making because again, the gaming division has to be in the red and has to have been in the red for over 10 years now. And
I
that
believe that.
is a crappy place to be. But at the same time, basically I feel like this means Xbox has been dying a slow death since the Xbox One launch, and that the Xbox is as a console is going to die. I think they do have plans to release at least one more system. I don't think it's going to do any numbers. They're going to become this third-party publisher. They're going to go the way of Sega, effectively. Third-party publisher, but Xbox will continue as a software platform.
Yeah, DirectX is going to become like the VHS of video games, right? I think that's kind of what they're aiming for. Like,
So are they actually shutting down their hardware production? Like
No,
actually stopping
just
producing
rumors, I think,
no.
right?
Xboxes? Okay.
I'm prophesying here.
Okay. All right.
The next Xbox will be the last Xbox. Now, people, and this is the thing, people have been predicting the end of consoles for well over 10
The
years.
Omega box, if you will.
Yeah.
People have been, that's what they should name it. But
Wasn't there a Penny Arcade comic about that?
I mean,
Like
Microsoft is notoriously bad at naming their system. Like Xbox was the only good name for a system they had.
Do a swerve. The next one's the
Maybe.
Twitter box.
There you go.
Free real estate. Put a bird on it.
Oh my goodness.
That ground's already been given up. You can take it back.
Oh wow.
So, but that's the thing. Like, that's what my prediction though is, and this is because of just they nailed they shot themselves in the foot. And the beginning of this generation, where they could have recovered from the Xbox One, Sony didn't screw up badly enough. At least not early enough. And that's the thing.
That's always a bad strategy. Like in chess, you never want to make a move assuming that your opponent is going to make a dumb decision. It's like, no, you want to assume they make the best decision and you plan on that.
Well,
and then if they screw up,
still tried.
all the better.
Yeah.
I mean, things like Game Pass, they were still trying. And part of it is like, okay, we killed all of our development studios. We clearly need new ones. Let's go buying all of these others. None of them are ready to ship a game yet. Like,
Well, some of them shipped a game, but it was
some of
terrible.
them did. Halo Infinite was mediocre. Better than Halo 4 and 5, but it was mediocre.
I was gobsmacked at Halo Infinite's like lack of content. I was like, and then it hit me it's because they contracted all of their employees, so they weren't around to make more content. And I'm like, you made a live service game and you contracted the employees, and their contract ends when it comes out. Why? That's the worst idea I could have possibly imagined.
And they know their contract ends when it comes out, so they're not going to be planning on making anything last.
Yeah, it's in writing that it's not even like Blizzard with Overwatch, where I'm like, where's the content? This game was fine on release. It just needed content. Where's the content? And it just spiraled out into dying almost over years. This is like they wrote it in from the start. We're going to bring on these developers, and then we're not going to have them when we need them. What's the plan for that? Dunno. What were they thinking?
I just realized, and I think you might. Whoop.
Sorry, that was my plate falling over.
I think you might understand this, Navarth. I think, or it might be we would need Rocketeer in here to understand. I'm suddenly feeling when it comes to Halo Infinite as well. Joseph Staten is to Halo Infinite what Hajime Tabata was to Final Fantasy 15. He's not there to fix it. He's there to make it shippable.
Yeah.
That's what happened as well. Like Halo Infinite was in such a disarray.
It was in a state, and then they brought in the fixer.
Yeah, and all he could do was like, okay, this is something that you can ship. I don't know if you should, but you can. And I think this is the hellscape that is the AAA industry as well. Because again, like looking at Suicide Squad and its high return numbers and its just dismal outlook. And this is where, again, like you do have these situations where, again, like developers can't just complain about the customer not understanding the plight of the developer. Because you're the customer. That is not the customer's job to care. The problem is, I still empathize because you spent how many years of your life making a game that's just not going to sell?
Yeah,
I've
done that.
Crappy.
It's true. I've done it.
I mean, at least there's some comfort in like, well, at least I'm employed. But again, as we can see with this industry, that's no guarantee of anything. You are like these guys were, and it's not like they were trying to make a game they thought was good and it turned out nobody wanted it. That is something that can create its own bitterness, but at least you were making something you wanted to make. This feels like something that they were dictated to make. They wanted to make something else. They presented it. Warner Brothers said, no, you're going to make it this thing. And now they've got to just work on it and make it sell, and they're going to take the blame. And then the publisher's going to be like, well, see, if only you made a good game. And it's like, we tried. You got in the way. But that's the tragedy is how many of these developers tried to make a good game, or at least as best as they could.
So what is a good game?
And here we go. Okay, I got to blow my nose real quick. And now you got an alarm going off?
That's my brother in the background. There's lots of noises happening. Literally, I was like, it'll be fine. I'll just join this call. And then suddenly, like, everything started happening in the background.
No.
All right, so, Paul, since this began with your philosophy of games discussion, I'll let you summarize while I blow my nose on camera.
Okay, so back maybe a month ago, I was streaming, and somebody asked me to go through my Steam library, and they're like, "Hey, what do you got in your Steam library?" And I was like, "All right, this would be a good excuse to talk about stuff." And so I was just kind of going through my Steam library, and about 2/3 of the way through talking about stuff, I was like, somebody asked me about, is this a good game or is that a good game, or why don't you play Call of Duty or something like that? And I was like, okay. It's because of my philosophy of gaming, which I'm not going to get into at the moment. No, I am. I am going to get into it. And so I did a little rant, and then I snipped it out and put it up on YouTube. And it basically comes down to, I think that games, the reason that games are fun, people always say like, oh, games are things that you play with that are fun. It's like, well, yeah, but that doesn't tell you anything. Like, why are they fun?
Wait,
And
what's
so
fun? Yeah.
yeah. So my perspective, and this is like, I'm not saying that I own this perspective or that I'm dedicated to this perspective. It's just like, this is the best place that I can get to as so far. So like, if anyone's got better ideas, I'd love to hear them. But as far as I can tell, games are fun because they're a cheap way to get expensive experience. Or put another way, it's a way to learn about something by doing that doesn't require you to risk the actual activity itself. So like, that's the reason that first person shooters are super popular, because getting shot at in real life is super dangerous, and getting shot at on a computer game super cheap, right? You don't take any risk of injury, and you get to be in all these very dangerous situations, and you feel like you're gaining experience that's going to be useful for you in real life. Same thing for porn games, right? Like, it feels like, oh, I'm in this really super valuable position. I'm gaining all this valuable experience that's going to apply to real life. Now, of course, in both of those situations, I think that it's a lie. I don't think the first person shooters prepare you for real combat, and I don't think porn games prepare you for a real relationship. But it feels that way, and that's why it feels fun. And that's also why gambling feels fun, because gambling is it's tickling the pattern recognition part of your brain. You're like, oh, I see this thing and it's all noise, but I think I can see a pattern in it. If I just wear the right lucky socks on the right day and I do this thing, then I see how this works.
If I invoke the ritual, I make money.
Yeah, exactly. I'll be able to win this game of luck. And so in all three of those situations, of course, in my perspective, it's a lie to sucker you into engaging with the system. But the reason that the lie works is because there's something true underneath that, which is like, Kerbal Space Program really is a great way to learn about orbital mechanics by doing. You could sit down with a maths textbook and with a computer simulation, and you could learn about orbitals and conic sections, and you could write out all the equations and do a bunch of homework. Or you could play Kerbal Space Program for like an hour, and you'd have fun doing it, and you'd be doing it by interacting with it, as opposed to by working through the textbook stuff. So I think that that's why games are fun, and I think it explains a lot about the games industry and about how to think about games. But I'd love to hear other people's perspectives. I know there's been a huge amount of discussion about like, what is a video game, or what are games, or what makes games art, or all these kind of things. And as far as I can tell, that's the most useful perspective to approach it from.
I don't, and I think you're onto some things, but I also think I disagree with a lot of it. But
yeah, good.
Not in a, because it's funny because like, before I watched that little video clip you had put together, I had been talking with a young man at my church about games and stuff, and to get him to explain what, like, the different kind of games, right? Because I think he asked me some kind of a question. I started talking about abstraction, right? Like, what really draws someone to a game. And for me, I think it partially goes into just a human nature thing. Humans like games, period. And chess is one of the perfect examples. Chess is a timeless game. Chess is a game that we've been playing for you, and if not chess, then similar games like it. Like, you have shogi, poker. There you go. You have poker. You have shogi. You have mahjong. You have all these different kinds of games across different cultures. And with chess, you could try and argue, okay, it's simulating warfare. I remember. It's because I was explaining why I'm not big into VR. Because it's like, you could argue, it's like, okay, chess is simulating warfare, and it's like, the context is warfare because you're trying to take each other's king. And you have characters like the knights, and you have the pawns.
Sure, it's themed, warfare themed.
It's themed.
Yeah,
but the
it's mostly an abstraction.
The mechanics aren't really, because your units are limited in weird ways. You can promote a pawn, but it's like, you promote them by sending them into enemy territory, and then suddenly they level up. Like, it doesn't, or it's like your pawn suddenly gets possessed by a dead man, and they're able to fight from the other side.
Become right.
It's like, when
well,
you
I think I can
about
explain that part of it, but yeah, it is a highly abstracted, kind of game. So I agree.
And to that, because I think in your original discussion you mentioned things like the improvement angle, and this also comes down to, again, like, what makes video games more difficult for people to get into, and to that extent, part of it is, you have to learn the controls and everything, but at the same time, the reward for learning the controls is then being able to continue progressing through the game and getting the feeling that you are improving at the game. And some of this is, typical dopamine tricks, but why do people then play sports? And why do people keep trying to get better at sports? Because they learn the rules, they get to better understand the rules, and they want to get better at executing at these sports and mastering the rules and mastering all these different things. And this is something that I especially understand better because 7-ish years ago, maybe a little more, I finally got to understand football, American football. I never understood American football. I was like, this is the slowest sport. It's so dull. What does 3rd and 7 even mean? And then someone explains to me what 3rd and 7 means. And all of a sudden I understand. All of a sudden I get like,
clicked into place.
So this is what the offensive side is trying to do. And this is what the defensive side is trying to stop them from doing. And I'm starting to see all the little like tricks and
it's got like a narrative to it.
And also
Almost.
It's like, this is more than just people running into each other. They're running into each other with a purpose. But here's the thing. What is football simulating?
It's warfare.
Yeah, but it's very
That's why it's called
poor
scrimmage.
warfare.
It's a scrimmage line, right? It's a skirmish.
Yeah.
Right?
But it's like,
I mean,
it doesn't look like that. I mean, again, it's like if you're good at football, are you good at warfare? Even if we were still using swords and stuff? I don't
if
think
it's
you would
lacrosse,
be.
maybe.
It was like
So
Or like in
hockey
a hockey.
with fights. Yeah.
Part of this is that games are also a way. I talked about porn earlier being as like a poor simulation of relationships, but games in general are a way that women decide which men are valuable in order to be romantically interested in. So, and that's because they realize that it's a simulation of warfare. It's a contest, right? And you have to be good at something, or you're not going to be able to succeed in a game. So that's why men are so attracted to playing games and getting good at them, because they know that somewhere in the back of their brain they're like, someday I'm going to be able to impress a lady, but with my sick StarCraft skills or whatever.
In Korea, maybe.
It's funny when you mentioned that too, about like games being kind of easier to learn than like the actual skill sort of thing. I actually found, like Kerbal Space Program, for example, teaching you about physics. I found the same also applies on a level lower about developing games. It's actually much easier to learn with like a game engine, because you have a game relatively quickly that you can tweak and learn from, versus the like traditional route of just programming up a whole game engine from scratch, which is great for learning about making a game engine. But man, is it bad for motivation if you don't know how to make a game engine. You will have a game engine for months, for years. And you won't get to see it like improve until a certain point where it's actually on the screen. You can like take the abstraction and put it into something you can interact with, right?
Yeah. I think that game development is the ultimate game. Right.
You're not wrong. So many people also are like, which engine do I pick? In the same way, it's like, which console do you recommend? It's like, they all are good at different things. Try them out. Yeah. They're also free too, for the most part. So I don't know why so many people ask the question.
Yeah. It's so amazing these days. So RamblePak, what's your proposal for the definition of games? Like, what would you say is a better match, a better fit for reality?
Well, are we specifically saying video games or?
Well, I mean, my thesis is that this is all games, right? Like every kind of game is a way to learn about how to live in the world more cheaply than actually doing a thing and finding out the hard way. So like storytelling is kind of a game.
I hesitate to use the word simulation. Rules are important to it, because every game you play to an extent has rules, and part of that is due to programming limitations. But part of that is because, and it's funny
computer
because
games now.
I've thought about this because, and you might understand this too, right? Over the past few years, since I found my new church, I've become more devout in my Christianity, and as a result, there are some things that I've stopped finding edifying. Like there are certain songs or bands I've stopped listening to because their content, I'm not comfortable with it. Square Hammer by Ghost. Good song. I don't listen to it anymore because even
Absolute
though
banger.
the
Can't listen to it.
the band's a satire, I know, but the lyrics just nah, I can't. So that's so the thing is, most of the games I play pretty bloody violent. So why does that not bother me? Right? And especially because a lot of instances of real world violence and other like even implications of violence, like I tell you, I didn't want to watch. I want nothing to do with the movie Cocaine Bear because the idea of making a dark comedy where people get eaten by a bear, which is like one of the worst ways I feel like you could die, like out of here. But meanwhile, I'm playing all these violent games and stuff, and it's like this doesn't bother me, and it's because I think again the abstraction, all that violence is the context, but what's really drawn me in isn't the violence; it's the rule set to the game because and especially the games that I play. Again, I don't play VR games. Why? I'm not a simulation player. I don't want to play a game where I really swing the sword. No, I want to be Dante and Devil May Cry, knocking people up into the air, flying like 20 feet up and just juggling them, like hovering in the air. It's like, I want to do the impossible stuff. But do I want to simulate that because it's a power fantasy? On the other hand, I want to simulate accomplishing the ability to annihilate these enemies on higher and higher difficulties using more and more abilities. And like, if there's a simulation at work, it's the simulation of actually being good at something. But
I think the context has like a certain value to it too.
oh, definitely.
Otherwise, there wouldn't be. But yeah,
it's like they feed into each other. The rules help define the context, and the context helps to define the rules. Like, all right, I want to make a shooter set in World War II versus I want to make a shooter set in Gettysburg.
yeah.
Going to be different rule sets. One is going to inform the other. But it's still rule sets, and that's where and simulation games, the rules are closer to reality. Farming simulator, there's and maybe you wouldn't call them rules, you'd call them methods, but how to properly like firstly you got to learn to use the tractor. This is different than a game driving. I would not tell someone driving is a game, even if the not NASCAR, because NASCAR is only one left turns. What's
Yeah.
what's
Drift
the?
racing?
Well, I'm thinking like the stuff they do in Europe where it's all over the roads.
Oh yeah, rally racing.
Yeah, there you go. Car stuff.
Sure.
But rules to that, and I guess you could call that a game to an extent, just a very dangerous one.
Yeah. Well, I wouldn't call a real life. I wouldn't call driving in real life a game, except insofar that it's practice for something else. Because, like, if you're driving in a race course, you are experiencing all the risks of driving in a car, and you're also paying all the costs for it, right? You have to pay for the gas in the car and the track and all that stuff. Like, it's all real. So, like a driving game where you're playing Euro Trucking Simulator or something, like that's absolutely a game because you don't have to buy a big rig in order to do it. In order to get kind of an experience of driving a big rig.
It's actually a
across
very good
Europe.
point because if that wasn't fun, like as an experience, it's actually strange to me that so many people like those games because it's just sitting in a truck driving. Like you could get paid to do that in real life.
Right.
Like,
Well,
or you can play a video game and not get paid to do it.
Well, the fascinating thing there is they also approach something different than like what I look for in a game is active engagement. What a lot of those games allow people to do is just tune out for a while. So people that are exhausted from a day of work or something, like they've been working on this really difficult stuff all day, are able to do something that after enough practice becomes, I don't want to say monotonous,
Like meditative.
but meditative.
Second
there you
nature.
go.
Sure. Well, it's a way for you to have agency without having to shoulder a huge amount of responsibility, right? If you've just been at work and you have to pay attention and you get all the things right, put all the things in the right place, and it's like, finally, I can just do something where I get to have an input, but the outcome isn't really that important. So it's you kind of relax into it and be active still because you're doing something, but without having to, Truant's Frenzy says low risk, high reward in simulation games.
Considering some of the
when you say something like a game, I'm just trying to summarize your stance. You'd say something like a game is a set of abstracted rules that allows you to engage with a simulation, something like that.
The only thing that I would consistently say is a set of rules. That's the limitation.
A
This is
game
one of
is
those areas.
playing within a set of rules, maybe.
Yeah, like I don't believe of having like. Once upon a time, maybe I tried to be super academic enough to like, here is my very thorough, all-encompassing definition. Now I've learned that things in life, some things are better left vague. The one shared element of games, be they in person or be they video game form, is that they work off a set of rules, but to what purpose, that can change. And this is especially because one of the things
So you're
that
not
I
too
feel,
particular about the ends of it, as long as the form is there.
yeah, and one of the reasons that I feel this way as well is I feel like we, and when I say we, I mean like a very collective. Like if you are involved in the discussion of games online at all, be it as I'm just a consumer and I want to voice what I like and what I don't like, or if you're a developer, or if you're just someone that is a self-appointed critic, such as myself, you usually have a very specifically defined perspective of what makes of what like games ought to be, and or what the games industry is. And I feel like one of the things people always forget, and this is true of like where again, has even Phil Spencer said about why they bought Microsoft Activision Blizzard King. And I always have the king in there. Who is king? What does king make? They make mobile games. Nobody at the
They
Game
do.
Awards cares about the mobile games. But you know what is actually making a lot of money? And you know where most of the actual women that play games are playing games? On the mobile end.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
at the same
It's
time,
also like a huge market in other countries too, right?
yes.
Like in Asia, it's mostly mobile platforms. Consoles are still a thing. Some consoles, not Xbox.
Yeah.
But like,
It's true and it hurts.
yeah, exactly. For a long time, I was like, just for context, I was a PC gamer for a good long while. I had an Xbox early on. My first console was actually a Dreamcast. I was never able to get into PlayStation because it was always like, this will be the time I'll get a PlayStation. And then it's like, oh, it's PlayStation 3. It's not reverse compatible with PlayStation 2. And I was like, well, I can throw that idea out. All those games on PS2 I wanted to play, I can't play on the PS3, so I won't get that one. And it just continued like that. But point being, yeah.
But
So what's your perspective now, Earth? I'm saying that games are like cheap learning. Ramble saying that they're kind of like a system of rules that you play within. Do you have a perspective on it?
Like what a game is.
What is a game?
I
Let
mean,
yourself loose. Live your best life.
what is the
Define a game.
developer? What is the actual game developer in this group? Well, okay, you actually made some Minecraft stuff too. But
Yeah, a little
I'm
bit,
the
a little
one
bit.
that's just the what is it? You can't make it, fake it, or not to fake it. What is it? Oh,
Fake it till
if
you
you
make
can't
it.
Fake it till
critique,
you make
if you can't
Oh,
critique,
right.
that's what I.
That's
have.
yeah. If you cannot do, teach. Right. That kind
Yeah.
of thing.
I mean, I think the way I approach games is probably a little different from like the average person because it's not about like the quality of the experience necessarily. It's more about the ideas I'll get while playing it. So I'll find games interesting that are objectively not good games if I can get a good idea out of it from
Sure.
even from my rage at the game if it's terrible, which isn't that common, but if there's some games that are out there where I'm like, "Oh my god, I can't believe that like they found the perfect confluence of awful systems to put together." But if that results in a good idea that I can put to use in something, that's actually a pretty valuable experience, right?
So
Bad games can be good learning opportunities.
so right now you're looking at Suicide Squad and you're like, oh, play me some of this.
Yeah. Yeah, I actually there are some like formational bad games that I played. I say bad games. They ended again. What's even a bad game with that definition? But like DOS games that run on entirely different assumptions of what a game should do. Uh,
Mm.
like getting soft locked is normally considered the worst thing that can happen in testing for most games, right? If a user
Sure.
does something and they can't possibly get out of it, and the only way to solve that is to reload, that's considered like pretty bad. I
Right.
played some old games where getting soft lock is actually part of the intended experience, and it's just considered soft failure. It's like, oh, the player got stuck. Well, then they're going to have to hit the start over button, and we're going to have them do it. We're not going to tell them they failed. It's just like, I can't move.
Keep
Okay,
trying until
do
you
it
decide
over.
that you're
Yeah.
done.
And in the same game, I had power ups. I'm thinking of Crystal Caves, by the way, for by Apogee.
The old Apogee game, I
old
love that
Apogee
one.
game. That
I
game is
loved
really
Crystal Caves.
it's really
We
cool.
only ever played the first one, and like one of
Oh,
my
yeah?
friends bought
Oh,
the,
it's like
the
this-
mail-in disc, so you get the second
Yes.
2 episodes.
The
And so we would
shareware.
usually go over to his house, but like we never played it. We just watch him play it.
Right.
Yeah,
That game
yeah,
is fascinating. And it's because the developer, like the designer who made those levels, is actually good at making levels, but they're working off a rule set that's alien to almost every modern game, because it has things like soft locks, it has things like power-ups with a timer on them. You can only pick up once at a level, and the power-ups are the only way that you can collect all the things you need to clear the level. So it's actually, when you think about it, not a power-up. It's like they're giving you the responsibility of using it correctly, and they're saying do it in 30 seconds and figure out what you're doing with this, or you won't be able to complete the level start over.
yeah.
So
Yeah,
it's
it's like
an
a
unpower-up.
timer. It's a level
Yeah.
timer that you get to start whenever you want.
Yeah, and if you take all those assumptions as they are, it's actually not a bad game. It's really interesting, but you have to like deprogram your brain from every other video game because of these assumptions that have been made by every other game that came after. That soft locking is bad, that power up should make you stronger and not soft lock you if they run out, which seem obvious in retrospect. But like that kind of thing is really interesting to me.
I just thought of
So
something
even bad
terrible.
games can be good learning opportunities.
I just thought of something terrible. So what you're saying is Crystal Caves was Dark Souls before Dark Souls came out.
Oh God, yeah, probably.
You know, I should follow that Twitter account again. It's like Dark Souls one.
It's
that
the Dark
just-
Souls. It's the Crystal
that
Caves.
just screenshots every like journalist article that's like blah is like Dark Souls, and it's like
Yeah,
some of the worst takes out there. Oh man.
it's the Dark Souls of Dark Souls.
Yep.
Yeah.
But you liked Crystal Caves not because it was a good game necessarily, but because it made you rethink how games are put together
Yeah,
and like how they communicate with the player.
I came out of that thinking like you could take these ideas and you could make a modern game that was more polished. That kind of worked these same ideas in. Obviously, like the soft locking, you probably want to get rid of. I don't think there's any ways around that. Where we've now gone so far beyond it that's like telling
Let's just
someone
call-
that's
No,
part of it.
no,
Call it soft lock, right?
You
Yeah.
can keep it. You can keep it, but you got to make sure that there are actual endings attached and they have
Oh.
achievements or something. Do the near automata.
yeah,
there
yeah.
you go.
Like think
Oh,
about
there
all the
you go,
ways.
yeah.
You think about all the ways you can die or get a bad ending in near automata.
Right. You're thinking like an old King's Quest style thing where you end up like a skeleton because you got stuck in a room and you couldn't get out.
There you go. Yes.
There you go.
Right. You could make a game.
But it's
with
not
these ideas.
exactly to be a soft lock. You have to not. The game has to not acknowledge it, right?
That's true.
If the game
Yeah.
starts acknowledging it, then it's really
That's
just
true.
more of a failure.
It's just an ending.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a failure state. That's true.
That is true.
That would be interesting to make a game that just doesn't acknowledge failure at all, right? It's
Yeah.
just like soft locks all the way.
Oh yeah, so like you die and the game just stays in that state and your body's on the ground and you can't move it.
It's like, okay, what are you gonna do now? You're gonna wait for the body to
This is
decompose?
exactly what I mean. You could brainstorm on something that weird and like that out there for hours, and it could like you could make a bunch of games that are totally unconventional off the idea, and some of them might be good. So like, and you wouldn't have started the conversation without playing something so alien and so like tone deaf. And I feel the same way about games like Risk of Rain, where there's two things at Risk of Rain that I found fascinating. One, everyone that's ever made a video game starts out making Risk of Rain 1. I think it's like you'll do like the tutorial where you bounce balls around in a room. You'll do like the Flappy Bird clone. You do something like that, and then the next game you make is like I'm going to make something simple that I can understand. It's in 2D probably. It might have to be in 2D, but it probably will be because there's
Sure.
less things to worry about.
It'll be
you're
Mario
gonna make-
Brothers.
Right, you're going to make a Mario Brothers or a Mega Man or something like that, where you run around and you jump into whatever. And immediately the next thing you're going to do, once you have platforms, once you have shooting a bullet, and once you have doors and things like that, is you're going to start putting in whatever you find is cool. And it'll be like, I made a gun. What about a shotgun? What about a shotgun that shoots rockets? What about if the rocket's homed? What about if all the homing rockets spawned enemies that chased enemies when they were done? Like, and you'll just be like, what? Can I add a jetpack? Can I add teleporters? And it just keeps going like that. And that was just Risk of Rain 1. All the items were just like, this is a cool thing that we thought about, and it would be fun to put it into the game, not even because the game needs it, because it's a thing that we want to try to put into the video game for fun.
Yeah. Yeah.
And like Risk of Rain 2 was, we have to make an actual 3D video game now with budget constraints and models and things like that. And we have to worry about what's easier to put in and fits in the time constraints. And you can see it kind of become more of a normal video game away from the
Although it is
person's
still
first
trying
video
to
game.
stay true to the brand of here's a bunch of
Yes.
random stuff. Can you make a game out of this?
Yeah, and you can see those influences that stuck around, and those are the things that are really strange about it. Where I look at it, and I'm like, I think the people that make Risk of Rain like have like a different brain chemistry than like your average game developer in some places. Like, it's so strange, some of these choices. And I've modded a bit of Risk of Rain. I remember there was one day where I was looking at like the scaling code for the multiplayer difficulty, and I was like, why is it always so strange? It's always too hard with like 4 people and too easy with like 2. What are they doing? And we stared at that thing for hours. We were there for like 2 hours going, I don't get it. What are they doing? What are they attempting? And we just decided, like, I think they just threw numbers at it until it spat out like what they wanted in 2 or 3 places, because there's no logic to be found in this thing. It's just like, it was like a wall of like, I want to say 60 lines of code that just had a whole bunch of math operations, and it had like duplicated if statements that did the same thing in one place and again in the same other place. And we're like, that's the same line of code. They're just doing it again. We couldn't work it out.
Wow.
But it was like a magic formula they came up with somewhere, and they brought it over from the first game to the second game because they were like, worked in that one.
Amazing.
Oh my god.
I could probably think of other examples of it too, but like maybe like the fact that every weapon has its own thing, like its own model that spawns on the player, and you can get them all, and you can truly cover your character in like tiny little mini objects.
Yeah.
That's the thing that would make a technical designer scream in terror. Like, what's the frame rate limit? Like what are we actually thinking of for how many models can be in the character? And they go, well, I don't know, we can keep adding items, so it could be
Just keep
potentially
adding them.
infinite. If
Yeah,
we add
yeah.
200 items, 200 more models that can be like sub models on the player character.
You can
And also-
totally lag out Risk of Rain 2. We're still talking about Risk of Rain 2, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
it's
you can
like,
totally lag it out.
yeah, as easily, and you can actually get stats in the game that allow you to be so like laggy that you can just break the game on that alone, right? How many things you can shoot at a time, how fast you can move, that kind of thing.
Oh man.
So I would suggest looking up and seeing if there's like a bad game jam. Like, there's gotta be a game jam for just making intentionally, like, don't do the good thing. Like, don't try and make a good game. Try and think about all the rules you can break to make. I mean, basically, it's like Goat Simulator, right? Like, Goat Simulator is intentionally an unfinished game.
The ungame jam.
The ungame jam. There you go. Let's break all the
Yeah.
rules.
And I think there's another part of that too, which is that polish is almost always a compromise. Where if you're spending extra time polishing, you can take a certain amount of time up until you have no more time, but then you have to start taking away from other features to make the ones that you have more polished.
Yeah.
AAA companies are the epitome of this, and they will polish everything to the exclusion of fun. Not always, of course. There's plenty of fun AAA games, but like there have been so many features I've seen that were actually fun that were 90% of the way there, that may not have even required that much extra effort to put in, but the risk of potentially having it take extra effort and taking more time, they went, well, we don't have time for that. We're going to polish what we've got even more. So that can happen for sure. It's why I think all of the most interesting games are made in a certain number of people. Like, it can be one person if they're really dedicated, but I feel like it's under probably like 75. A studio of that size can make plenty of types of game, but aren't restrained by how many people are in the studio, all kind of slowing down the process, making it inefficient, and kind of having to have so many checks and balances that, like, in order for the thing to be shippable, they have to sort of restrain so much creativity from people. Because when you have 75 people, you have people with roles that are fairly big, and they have to report to only one person. So all they have to do is make content that one person will approve of, as opposed to it going down a pipeline of 10 people, 3 of which are directors, all 3 of which have different priorities that are going to argue with each other. And none of them are ever going to speak to the person that was actually working on the thing, right? They're just going to give their opinion.
Yeah, nothing really outstanding can ever get approved when there are too many people looking at it.
Yeah, exactly. Every person with like that doesn't like a thing will mention that, and negative feedback is a lot stronger than positive feedback.
Yeah.
Like,
I
it's not
think
like you have one person that says I loved it, and then one person says I hate it. If somebody hated it, that's a problem. Whereas if somebody loved it, it's just nice.
I think in the future I'm going to need to do a podcast where we just talk about, because this is reminding me of reading back like several developers have basically said for them the ideal team size for making the game is like 20 to 30, and the larger
Right.
you get after that, the more challenges you get creatively, the more challenges
Yeah.
you get as a team, right?
Yeah.
Like and other things. And I
What?
think maybe that explains why, like, these days, some of the games that I find are very enjoyable are clearly from a smaller, like, double A sized team or something like that.
Absolutely.
But even then, like, a double A team can be like 100-person team. Like,
Yeah.
that's
And I found it actually really funny when you said like 20 to 30, because I was thinking about it and I'm like, I bet 20 to 30 developers was like the 75 developers of 15 years ago.
Right. Yeah.
Like because I'm thinking about it from the perspective of like a AAA team now, which is like 250 to
Yeah.
I don't know
500 or
500.
whatever.
Yeah, it's huge. And I'm like, well, that's like the size where I've
That's
worked on
too
teams
much.
about that size and it felt good. And I'm like, I bet back then when the average team size was like, I don't know, 100 something people, they're like, yeah, 20 to 30 is great.
Hmm. Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
wonder, I hope it doesn't keep getting bigger
well, it's
because like,
just all
in
the
the future with
demands.
1,000-person dev teams.
I mean, you have all
Yeah.
the demands and everything, and I mean that's the thing. Like, I'm playing for video purposes. I am playing Evil West right now, and that's
Mm.
I don't know how many people were on that team, but it's clearly not a AAA game, right? When you're walking around in the environment and you have NPCs talking but their mouths don't move, it's like, oh,
Yeah.
this ain't AAA.
Oh yeah.
And the levels are very linear and stuff, but they focused on what they could, and that focus, it's they managed to do something really really neat, really good. But it's not AAA. But that's the thing. It's like that team's probably like 100 people.
Yeah, for sure.
But I feel like there's got to be something that I played recently that was like, oh yeah, this was only 30 people, and you're like, this was only 30 people. This game's great, but
Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like most of the games that I like are those much smaller teams. Like I think Satisfactory is maybe 30, 40 people, something like that. Factorio is a very small team. I think they've got about 20 people or something. Valheim is developed by a pretty small team. I think they've got 15. It's probably bigger now since it took off. But what's that? What's the one crazy relativity one? I
Oh,
can't
yeah.
remember. That was like one guy made that whole game.
there's a number
Oh,
of
no, that's
those.
good.
I feel like I should know what you're talking about because there's a whole bunch. Like there's one called Aperture.
Yeah.
There's one called there's one that released last year. Oh, Viewfinder.
That's the one I'm.
Viewfinder, yeah, I haven't played Viewfinder yet, but I'd like to. That seems like a really novel experience. But I don't really go in for the AAA experience. Like I played what was the one where you could like blow everything up? You were on the on Mars and you could blow everything up. Anyway,
Red
it was some
Faction?
Faction 3?
Red Faction, yeah, and it was like none of the AAA qualities of the game were like they didn't grab me, right? I wasn't like, oh, I love that you can get in and out of the vehicle and it animates the guy and he's like moving around inside the vehicle. It's like it doesn't do anything for me. Like it doesn't have any gameplay interaction. Like nothing about that speaks to the systems. It speaks to the simulation. It's just like this window dressing on it, right? So I like the kind of games that are like kind of like you were saying, Rebel, like all these systems. You're really close to the rules. You're playing with the systems and how they interact with each other. You're learning how the system is performing. And like if I wanted to watch an awesome movie, I would go watch a movie, and and then I wouldn't be responsible for fiddling all the buttons, and I wouldn't have to be concentrating on it. I could enjoy the visuals.
Yeah. It's like I was thinking of Earth Defense Force as another one example of like that team is. Yeah. Go on.
So I'm just going to say, like, I remember Earth Defense Force 2017 came out in Xbox 360, and me and my buddy loved it. It was clearly not a good game, but it was also like it's like the B movie. It's like the Army of Darkness of video games kind of a thing.
Sure.
Where you
sure.
where you play it, it's like there's a lot of stuff in this game that's not good, but it's a great time anyway.
Well, I feel like also like people talk about how jank it is, and oh my god, is it jank?
Oh yeah.
But it's also a game that I found super impressive for like one thing alone, and I've had to do this on a project, and I really love doing it, so I kind of understand where they're coming from. So it kind of speaks to me in that sense. And what it is you have a certain amount of content, and the context is somewhat, but not that important. You have soldiers, you have ant models, you have a couple projectiles they can shoot, and you have access to the database of game behaviors of how things get shot and how much damage they deal, and if they have physics impacts, and a couple little, like tweaky things like that are already in the engine. Hand them to a designer and say, make it fun. Just you can't ask for anything new. You can't get custom animations, you can't get custom sounds, you can't get cutscenes, you can't get polish for interactions. They might be a little jank. Just do what you can with what you've got, and what can you make the most interesting and the most fun and the most deep with just these systems that are already there. And I think EDF is just nothing but that. It's like,
and for close to, actually in Japan, probably over 20 years now. But
yeah,
oh my goodness, those games are genius in such a wonderful way. Like again, Tracer Frenzy, if you're still watching, then he might remember in our gaming club, we used to have weekly tournaments and stuff. And one me and my buddy set up was, how long can you survive in this like ant hill level on the highest difficulty?
oh yeah.
And there are so many ants in that, like giant ants in that map. Like there are people that were like, "Oh, this is going to be easy." 2 seconds later, they're already dead. It's like, "Oh my gosh, what's going on?" We had someone last over a minute, and they were the only one that even got close to it. Like, because everyone else was like 15 seconds, 16 seconds. It's this one person somehow, just by trying their best to just run away, lasted over a minute. But it was insane. The frame rate chugs, and the graphics are already bad looking. So it's like, those games are golden.
We played a game like that, and but it wasn't right off the bat. It was like a certain trigger in the mission dropped like 1 billion ants into a little tiny tunnel, and we were like, "There's so many ants that their ragdolls filled the tunnel."
Yes,
I'm talking like 50 meters back, and the enemies were pushing the ragdoll plug at you, and it was just flailing ant arms and like low FPS, and you couldn't see what was going on. And if you shot a bullet, you'd hit the ants and blow yourself up. And we were like, "They're just coming at us. How do we win?" And what it ended up being at the end of the day was I have C4, and this being EDF, it's not like I have the pack of C4 that you throw down and right click and it blows up like in GoldenEye or something. That would be a sane person's choice. No, I have 40 packs of C4. So I put 40 packs of C4 down the tunnel all the way and wait for the ants to run all the way to us, and I hit the button, and then I watch the game become 1 FPS, and all the red dots disappear, and then the plug of ragdolls to come flooding down and overwhelm us, but they're all dead already, so then we win.
Oh, and you know
so,
what?
Yeah.
What was it?
It was really fun.
There was the Xbox 360 one that was made by a Western studio. And it's like they didn't get it because it's like what you said about, people that, the fascination of bad games, because they tried to make it good. Like I remember
they tried to polish EDF.
I played it and I'm like, no, they tried to make it a good game. And it's just, what it was wonderful. This
is like taking like a polisher to like a wiffle ball and then wondering why you half a wiffle ball at the end. It's not like it's solid gold and you're trying to polish it. It's the shape that it is. The holes are on purpose.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Oh man.
All right, we ought to be wrapping up though. This was wonderful. Thank you very much, guys, for joining me. Maybe something like this again next month.
For sure.
You got to get another video done first, I think. If that's the rule.
And I have an idea. I've got several actual like things.
Cool.
Working and scripts. So not going to be the Evil West video, but I've got several things I'm working on. But I do have a video that I'll be working on, and so we'll see. But no, this was a great time. Thanks everyone for commenting and watching. Hope to see this series do pretty well. I hope people check out the VOD, listen to the discussion, and think, oh, this is actually pretty cool stuff. So thanks for watching, everybody. Have a good night.
Yeah, thanks again.